Thank you for listening to Discovering the Scriptures with Dr. Peter John Parisis. Currently, we are in Daniel, chapter 6, verse 21. Reading from the King James Bible. First, quote, "Then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever," unquote. Let's go to God in prayer. Father, just ask in prayer that if there's any sin at all that I've committed, would you please forgive me? In Jesus Christ's name I pray. And Lord, if there's any prayer hindrances that I have in my life, that you would let me know so I can take care of them right away. Because now I want to come before you and ask that you would grant me wisdom and knowledge correctly, so that I can read the Scriptures, hear the Scriptures, understand the Scriptures, and apply them correctly in my lives and in the lives of those around me. Please. In Jesus' name I pray. Now, Father, at the end of this prayer, I give a moment of silence. I respect and also to allow you to be able to talk back to me with no hindrances. Please do so. Okay. If you need more time, hit the pause button. Now, I want to go ahead and read this to you in the Young's literal translation. Then Daniel hath spoken with the king. O king, to the ages live. Now, I want to read to you the Greek Old Testament, which predates the Masoretic text that was used to give us a good chunk of our Protestant Bible that was written about 1,000 years later than the Septuagint. The Septuagint was something that the apostles and Jesus had available because a lot of them spoke Greek back then, and besides the Hebrew Bible. And the Messianic, we didn't have that. The oldest copy we have is like the 9th century. I'm not saying it's not worth anything to be used, but I want to show you some differences here so you can make up your own mind. Here's the Septuagint. Remember, this is about the 6th to 7th century before Christ. Quote, "And Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever." I'm going to continue on with the paragraph that this is found in the Septuagint. Quote, "My God has sent his angel and stopped the lions' mouths, and they have not hurt me, for uprightness was found in me before him, and moreover before thee, O king, I have committed no trespass." Then the king was glad for him, and he commanded to bring Daniel out of the den. So Daniel was brought out of the den, and there was found no hurt upon him, because he believed in his God. And the king commanded, and they brought the men that had accused Daniel, and they were cast into the den of lions, they and their children and their wives. And they reached not the bottom of the den, before the lions had the mastery of them, and utterly broke to pieces all their bones. Unquote. Now that's the Septuagint. That's the oldest Greek Bible that we have. Now I'm going to go ahead and read this to you in the King James Bible so you can see some differences here. Now this is in the paragraph that is written. Daniel 6, 21 and 22. Quote, "Then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. My God hath sent his angel, and hath shut the lion's mouth, and they have not hurt me. For as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt." Unquote. Now that's the end of their paragraph. Now you notice that the Septuagint went from verse 21 all the way through 24. But here we have the paragraph as being verse 20 and 22. Why? Let me give you some education when it concerns the Bible and the chapters and verses. Now we had divisions of the Bible cutting this down to manageable sections because the original just goes from one verse to the next, it just runs on, because the parchment, the lambskin, the papyrus reed, everything was expensive to write on, so they just took up all the space possible. So it wasn't until the 4th century AD that they found a Greek manuscript that used paragraphs. And then Jerome in the 5th century cut up in little small portions or passages the Bible. But it wasn't until the year 1227 AD that Stephen Langton divided the Bible up into chapters. And again, it wasn't until the 1500s that verses were placed in by Robert Steffens. So just for FYI, now Robert Stephen, he did the verses in the New Testament. Ben Asher family, around 8900, did the Old Testament division into verses. It helps us to handle and find things easier. So that's one observation we see different from the Septuagint Greek Bible to the King James Bible that was using the Masoretic mostly for its translation. But there's some other differences that I want you to see when we're comparing these old texts together, because it's important. Now, those differences we're going to examine in verse 22 when we get to it, about the differences in translation. But right now, I want you to notice one thing. In verse 21, Daniel said unto the king, O king, live forever. This is a customary salutation. So when you look up live forever, there are 25 occurrences of it, starting from Genesis 3:22, and it just continues on through. Even Daniel used it when he was talking in the Aramaic to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, O king, like forever. And then Daniel 3:9, O king, like forever. And then the queen said it to the king when she was talking about Daniel being able to interpret the writing on the wall. She goes, O king, live forever. And then we have the 119 rulers that fought against David to put him to death. And they said in Daniel 6:6, King Darius, live forever. Daniel says it in 6:21, O king, live forever. This continues on in Joel, but Judah will live forever. And Zechariah, so live forever goes throughout the entire thing. But this is a customary, ancient customary salutation. Now, I want you to remember that Daniel is a ruler, before being thrown in the lion's den, of Babylon. He is the king's favorite and wants to make him number 2 prior to all this. Daniel has to have his wits about him because he's between 85 and 90 years old. So here's God paying honor to Daniel and showing us that indeed he did have his wits about him at such an old age, because he does the customary salutation to the king, not one of bitterness, not one of hatred, not one of being tired, his right mind is not there, not passed out, but a man who looks at everything as it comes from the hand of God. He has developed into another Jesus on earth, basically. He sees things from the hand of God, good and bad, as you'll see as we go further and further into this. But this is the differences of the Septuagint and the King James that we have, as far as later on in this paragraph. But in this verse, we basically have the same thing. O king, live forever. Now let's go ahead and parse this so we can see how Daniel is writing. Then said, Pale stem, perfect aspect. So perfect aspect is completed. PL is a perfect verb, occurs 23 times in the Old Testament. In the Aramaic, it is the intensive form of the verse. So, it's very intensely said. Daniel unto the king, O king, live. Let's parse that. PL stem, casually written, imperative aspect, and that's an order or command. Live forever. That ends the parsing of this. Now, Let's take a look at the Interlinear Bible and see, is there anything we can draw from this customary citation? Did he say it or do it differently at all? So looking at the Interlinear Bible, I found nothing out of the ordinary from what we just parsed and read. So let's look at John Gill's commentary and see what he has, because remember, he uses books of commentaries of the Bible that are 1,000 years old to us now. And these were around before the Masoretic Bible was. That was used a lot in the translation of the King James for us. So let's read John Gill. Quote, "Then said Daniel unto the king, whose voice he knew, though the tone of it was much altered, O king, live forever. He does not reproach him for delivering him into the hands of the enemies, and suffering him to be cast into that place, which he might have prevented, had he been more resolution. He knew it was done with reluctancy, though with weakness, which he does not upbraid him with, but freely forgives him, and wishes him health, long life, and prosperity." Unquote. So there's a lot of things going on here. Daniel has his wits about him. It's not noted that he sounded tired. It's not noted that he had a fretful night, that he didn't sleep. None of that. None of that at all. We have a man who's in repose, in the lion's den. Does he continue with his praying 3 times a day? Why wouldn't he? I'd probably even pray more, knowing that I'm on my way home. But we're going to have to go further and find out what more took place. So stay tuned. If you like this, please hit the like button. And don't skip these verses, because they all interlock and they all have meaning later. I do want you to know what Daniel did here. He's facing a life and death crisis. He knows that in his book, because he's writing this now afterwards, he knows in his book he's going to be having prophecy of the last times. Is he trying to tell us stuff here? Because he did about praying 3 times a day. Is he trying to tell us something here? We'll have to continue so you can find out and you can make up your own mind. God bless, and please meditate upon the Scripture and tell others.